When you hear the name Ava Gardner, what comes to mind? Probably those emerald eyes, those flawless features, and one of the biggest stars of Hollywood's golden age. But nobody ever told you about that night, that cold December night in 1946. The night Howard Hughes tried to kidnap her, and what Ava had to do to save her own life. This story remained hidden for years. Because back then, a woman revealing such a thing meant the end of her career. But the truth emerged years after Ava's death, and that truth exposed the darkness lurking beneath Hollywood's glittering surface. In the summer of 1946, Ava Gardner was only 23 years old. MGM Studios was using her in small roles, but her star had not yet begun to shine. With her long brown hair, deep green eyes, and that southern accent, she caught everyone's attention at the studio. But one person's attention was far more dangerous than the others. Howard Hughes was one of America's richest and most powerful men, a billionaire, pilot, film producer, and some said insane. Hughes' passion for women was legendary in Hollywood. But that passion had gradually transformed into a diseased obsession. The moment he first saw Ava, something changed inside Hughes. This wasn't just desire. This was a need to possess, a need to control. Ava Gardner was no longer a human being to him. She was a collectible item, and Hughes would do anything to obtain her. At first, flowers arrived. Every day, red roses, white orchids, exotic blooms. Ava sent them to the studio, to her home, even to her dressing room. The cards bore only the initials HH, nothing else. Then came the jewelry. Diamond earrings, pearl necklaces, sapphire rings. Ava returned them. Every single time. But Hughes wouldn't give up. One evening, Ava was having dinner with a friend at Chasen's restaurant. A waiter approached their table with a bottle of champagne from Hughes. Ava refused the bottle. The waiter explained sheepishly that Hughes was in the private room on the upper floor, watching her. Ava stood up, took her friend, and left the restaurant. But when she got into the car, she found an envelope on the back seat. Inside was a letter from Hughes. The letter stated that Hughes could see her everywhere, that she couldn't escape from him, and that he always got what he wanted. Ava tore up the letter and threw it out the window. But the fear inside her could no longer be erased. The next day at MGM Studios, her producer, Louis B. Mayer, called her into his office. Mayer was Hollywood's most powerful man, the god of the studio. And that day he gave Ava a very clear message. He told her that Hughes was interested in her, that this could be very good for her career. Ava refused. Clearly, definitively. She stated she wasn't interested. Mayer's face changed. He reminded her that she was still a young actress, that there were thousands of girls like her at the studio. He implied that the support of a man like Hughes could make her a star, or the opposite. When Ava left the office, she noticed her hands were trembling. The studio was trying to sell her to Hughes, like merchandise. That week, someone from Hughes called her every day. His secretary, his driver, his lawyer. They all delivered the same message. Hughes wanted to have dinner with her, just once, just to talk. Ava refused them all. But Hughes's men wouldn't give up. Cars were parked in front of her house. When she arrived at the studio, they were waiting for her. When she went to the market, she was followed. One night, when Ava returned home, she discovered her key didn't work. The lock had been changed. When she opened the door, one of Hughes's men was inside. He was holding new keys. The man told her that Hughes was worried about her safety, that this neighborhood wasn't safe. They had changed the locks, installed stronger doors, set up an alarm system. Ava pushed the man outside and slammed the door. But she didn't sleep at all that night, because now she understood Hughes wasn't just watching her. He was trying to infiltrate every area of her life. A few days later, when Ava checked her phone bill, she saw long calls to numbers she didn't recognize. When she called the phone company, they were puzzled too. The calls had been made from Ava's house, but Ava had never called those numbers. Then she understood the truth. Her phone was being tapped, and not just her phone. Her house, her car, perhaps even her dressing room. One evening, she told everything to her closest friend Lana Turner. Lana listened and shook her head. She told her to stay away from Howard Hughes. Hughes wasn't just rich, he was dangerous too. Lana knew girls who had dealings with him. They all regretted it. Some of them were never seen again. Ava's blood ran cold. She wanted to ask what Lana meant, but Lana looked away. She only urged her to be careful and never be alone with Hughes. But fate had other plans. December 12, 1946. Thursday night. Ava attended a charity event. She was at the Ambassador Hotel. Her sparkling dress, makeup, hair, everything was perfect. But there was an uneasiness inside her, as if something was going to happen. When the event ended, Ava went outside. Her driver should have been waiting for her. But her driver wasn't there. Instead, there was another car, a black Cadillac, and one of Hughes's men was sitting at the wheel. The man rolled down the window and told her that her driver had fallen ill, that Hughes had sent him to take her home. Ava backed away. She said she would call a taxi. The man got out of the car. He was a large man, broad shoulders, cold eyes. He repeated that Hughes insisted. The tone in his voice wasn't a request, it was an order. Ava looked around. The street was empty. The event had ended. Everyone had left. She was alone. The man opened the back door and told Ava he would just take her home. But the certainty in his voice made it clear that Ava had no choice. Ava had no choice. Either she would get in the car, or she didn't even want to think about it. She got in the car, but the car didn't go home. For the first few minutes, Ava said nothing. She was looking out the window. The streets were familiar, but then she noticed. They were deviating from the route. They were going in the opposite direction from her house. Ava leaned forward and told the man her house was in the other direction. But the man didn't answer. He just gripped the steering wheel tightly and didn't take his eyes off the road. Ava's heartbeat accelerated. She tried the door handle. It was locked. It wouldn't open from the inside. The car was now heading out of Los Angeles, toward Malibu. The road was dark and desolate. Ocean on the right, mountains on the left. And there was nobody. Ava spoke again. She asked where they were going. She stated she wanted to go to her house. But the man didn't answer again. He just increased his speed. The car finally stopped in front of a private estate. Iron gates, high walls, security lights. The gates automatically opened, and the car entered. Ava was really scared now. This was one of Hughes's homes. But she didn't know which one, and she didn't know what would happen inside. The car stopped in front of a large mansion. The man got out and opened Ava's door. Ava didn't move. She said she didn't want to get out, that she wanted to go home. The man just waited, expressionless, patient, as if he could wait all night. Then the door of the house opened, and Hughes came out. Howard Hughes looked very different that night. Instead of his usual suit, he was wearing casual clothes. His hair was disheveled. There was a strange expression on his face. Fatigue, or something else. Ava couldn't tell. Hughes approached the car and stopped in front of Ava's window. He told her they could finally talk, alone, without interference. Just a few hours. Then they would take her home. Ava didn't answer, because she knew she had no choice here. Hughes had brought her here, and now she didn't know what to do. The man took Ava's arm, and gently but firmly helped her out of the car. Ava resisted, but the man's grip was too strong. He started leading her toward the house. Inside, the house was luxurious but cold. Huge halls, antique furniture, but no sense of life. It was like a museum or a prison. Hughes was walking ahead. He led Ava to a sitting room. Inside, a fireplace was burning. There was a bar, and on the walls there were photographs of Ava. Ava stopped. She looked at the photographs on the wall. Some were professional photos taken at the studio. But some had been taken during private moments. Ava at restaurants, on the street, shopping, all taken secretly. Hughes noticed that Ava was looking at the photos. He said they were beautiful. that Ava was so photogenic. He confessed that he had been watching her for years, recording her every movement, every moment. Ava's stomach turned. This wasn't just admiration. This was a sick obsession. Hughes invited Ava to sit. He offered her a drink. Ava refused. She just repeated that she wanted to go home. Hughes' face changed. The patient expression disappeared. In its place came a hard, cold expression. He said Ava was insisting on not understanding that he had given her opportunities, been kind, but Ava had rejected it. He added that the time for patience was over. Ava stood up. She said she wanted to leave, otherwise she would call the police. Hughes laughed. A cold, merciless laugh. He said calling the police wouldn't work, that everyone in this city knew him, worked for him. No one would believe Ava, she was just a young actress, and Hughes was a billionaire. Ava was truly panicking now. She ran toward the door, but the big man was waiting there, blocking the way. Hughes approached Ava. He told her it didn't need to be this difficult, that he just wanted to spend some time. If Ava was nice, everything would be easy. But if she continued to resist, things could become much more difficult. Ava's eyes scanned around the room. She was looking for an escape route, but there wasn't one. The man was at the door. The windows were locked, and the distance between her and Hughes was closing. Hughes put his hand on Ava's arm. Ava pulled back. She said she didn't want him to touch her. Hughes' face reddened. He raised his voice. He shouted that Ava had no right to reject him, that he had done so much for her, that he could make her a star. But instead of being grateful, Ava was being arrogant. Ava responded. She said she didn't want anything from Hughes, didn't know him, had no relationship with him. She repeated that she wanted to be released. Hughes was angry now. Really angry. He said he would teach Ava something, that in Hollywood, women didn't have the luxury of saying no, especially not to him. He lunged toward Ava. Ava tried to escape, but Hughes caught her. He gripped her arm tightly. Ava screamed. She called for help. But there were only Hughes's men in the house, and they didn't intervene. Hughes pushed Ava toward the wall. His face was very close to Ava's face. His breath was hitting Ava's face. In his eyes was a wild, uncontrolled light. Ava understood in that moment what Hughes was trying to do to her, and if she didn't do something, this night would be the worst night of her life. But Ava Gardner, that farmer's daughter from North Carolina, wasn't someone who gave up easily. In a split second, Ava made a decision. She had learned something from her brothers back in North Carolina. When cornered, when escape was impossible, you fought back with everything you had. She looked directly into Hughes's eyes. Her voice was steady, almost calm. She told him she understood now. Understood what he wanted, and she would give it to him. But not like this. Not with force. She said she had been foolish to resist, that she was just scared. If he would just give her a moment, she would cooperate. Hughes paused. The rage in his eyes flickered with confusion. Then something else, desire mixed with triumph. He believed he had won. He loosened his grip slightly, told her that was more like it, that she was finally being smart. He said she would see how good life could be with him, how he could transform her into the biggest star Hollywood had ever seen. Ava nodded. She asked if she could fix her hair, compose herself. She gestured toward the bar area where there was a mirror. Hughes smiled. A predator's smile. He released her arm completely, told her to take her time, that they had all night. Ava walked slowly toward the bar, her legs trembling but her mind racing. On the bar counter she could see various bottles, glasses, and an ice bucket with a heavy silver champagne chiller. Her heart pounded as she reached for her purse, pretending to look for a compact mirror. Hughes was watching her, but his guard was down now. He poured himself a drink, confident that Ava had submitted. That was his mistake. In one fluid motion, Ava grabbed the champagne chiller. It was heavier than she expected, cold and solid in her hands. She spun around and swung it with all the strength she had. The chiller connected with the side of Hughes's head with a sickening thud. The glass in his hand shattered on the floor. Hughes staggered, his eyes wide with shock. Blood began trickling from his temple. Ava didn't wait. She ran for the door. The big man was still there, but he was momentarily frozen, stunned by what he had just witnessed. Ava crashed into him, using all her weight and momentum. He stumbled backward. She was through the door, running down the hallway. Behind her she could hear Hughes shouting, his voice thick with rage and pain. Footsteps thundered after her. The front door was ahead. Ava's fingers fumbled with the locks. There were too many of them. A bolt, a chain, a deadlock. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely grip them. The footsteps were getting closer. Finally, the last lock turned. Ava threw open the door and burst out into the cold December night. The driveway stretched before her, long and dark. The iron gates at the entrance were closed. She ran anyway. Her heels clicked on the pavement. Then she kicked them off and ran barefoot. The gravel cut into her feet, but she didn't stop. She could hear the men behind her now, shouting at each other. The gates were still far away, too far. They would catch her before she reached them. Then she saw it. A gap in the wall, partially hidden by overgrown bushes. Not a gate, but a service entrance or maintenance access. She changed direction and plunged into the bushes. Thorns tore at her dress, scratched her arms and face, but she pushed through. On the other side was a smaller door, old and rusted. She pulled at it desperately. It was stuck. Behind her, the voices were closer. They had seen where she went. Ava pulled again, putting her full weight into it. The door groaned. Rust flaked away. And then it gave way, swinging open, so suddenly she almost fell. She was outside the property. The Pacific Coast Highway stretched before her, dark and empty at this hour. No cars, no people, just the sound of waves crashing in the darkness. Ava ran toward the road. Her feet were bleeding now, leaving dark prints on the asphalt. Every breath burned in her lungs, but she kept running. Headlights appeared in the distance. A car was coming. Ava ran into the middle of the road, waving her arms frantically. The car slowed down. For a terrible moment, Ava thought it might be one of Hughes's men. But then she saw the driver. An elderly couple, their faces shocked at the sight of a barefoot woman in a torn evening gown, blood on her face, standing in the middle of the highway. Ava approached the passenger window. Her voice was hoarse, desperate. She told them she needed help, that someone was trying to hurt her, that she needed to get away from here right now. The woman in the passenger seat looked frightened, but she unlocked the door, told Ava to get in quickly. Ava collapsed into the back seat. Through the rear window she could see figures emerging from the gates of Hughes's estate, but they were too late. The car was already pulling away, heading back toward Los Angeles. The elderly man asked if they should call the police. Ava shook her head. She knew what Hughes had said was true. The police wouldn't help her against a man like him. Instead, she asked them to take her to Lana Turner's house. During the drive, the woman gave Ava a blanket from the trunk, wrapped it around her shoulders, asked if she was hurt badly. Ava said she would be okay, but inside she knew nothing would ever be okay again. When they reached Lana's house in Beverly Hills, Ava thanked the couple profusely. The man tried to give her money for a doctor, but Ava refused. She just needed safety. She needed her friend. Lana opened the door, took one look at Ava's condition, and pulled her inside without a word. She ran a bath, cleaned Ava's wounds, gave her tea and whiskey, and finally, when Ava was ready, she listened to everything. When Ava finished her story, Lana's face was pale. She told Ava she had been luckier than some of the others, that there were girls who never made it out of Hughes's homes, girls whose disappearances were explained away as runaways or accidents. Lana made a phone call. Within an hour, a lawyer arrived, a man who specialized in handling delicate situations for Hollywood stars. He listened to Ava's account, took notes, and then delivered the hard truth. If Ava went to the police, Hughes would destroy her. He had the money, the connections, the power. He would paint her as a gold digger, a scorned woman trying to extort him. The studios would drop her. The press would crucify her. Her career would be over before it truly began. But there was another option. The lawyer could make it very clear to Hughes that if he ever came near Ava again, if he ever spoke her name in public, certain photographs and testimonies would be released. Not to the police, but to the press. And not just about Ava, but about all the others. Hughes had built his empire on secrecy. The threat of exposure was the only weapon that could touch him. The deal was made through intermediaries. Ava never saw Hughes again, but she felt his presence for months afterward. The sensation of being watched, the paranoia that someone was following her, the nightmares that woke her screaming in the middle of the night. The flowers stopped coming. The phone calls ceased. The cars outside her house disappeared. But the damage was done. Ava's career eventually flourished. She became one of the biggest stars in Hollywood, just as Hughes had predicted. But she never forgot that night. Never forgot what men with power believed they were entitled to. Never forgot how close she had come to becoming another silent victim. Years later, after Hughes's death in 1976, other women began to come forward, quietly, carefully. They shared their stories with each other, actresses, secretaries, waitresses, women from all walks of life who had caught Howard Hughes's attention and paid a terrible price for it. Some had been lucky like Ava and escaped. Others had not been so fortunate. There were whispers of payoffs, forced abortions, women who had been institutionalized or simply vanished when they became inconvenient. In 1982, a reporter approached Ava Gardner for an interview. By then she was in her 60s. Her legendary beauty faded, but her spirit still fierce. The reporter asked about her relationship with Howard Hughes. Ava's answer was carefully worded, but the truth was in her eyes. She said that Hughes was a dangerous man who used his wealth and power to control and hurt people. She said that Hollywood in those days was a place where young women were treated as property, where saying no was not an option, where survival often meant compromise or escape. The reporter pressed further, asked if Hughes had ever hurt her personally. Ava looked out the window for a long moment. Then she said something that would be quoted for years afterward. Howard Hughes taught me that monsters don't always look like monsters. Sometimes they look like the richest man in the world. Sometimes they smile while they're destroying you. And sometimes the only way to survive is to hit back harder than they expect. She never elaborated, never gave the full story, but those who knew, understood. The night of December 12, 1946, remained Ava's secret for the rest of her life. She never told reporters, never wrote it in a memoir, never spoke of it publicly. But she told her closest friends, told them to be careful, told them that beauty could be a curse as much as a blessing in Hollywood, told them that survival sometimes required violence. When Ava Gardner died in 1990, among her personal effects was a silver champagne chiller, dented on one side, a small bloodstain that had never quite washed away. Her housekeeper tried to throw it out several times over the years, but Ava always kept it. It was a reminder of the night she had faced a monster, of the moment she chose to fight rather than submit, of the strength that existed within her that she never knew she had until that moment. The champagne chiller was eventually auctioned off with the rest of her estate. The buyer was never identified. But those who knew the story, who understood what that dented piece of silver represented, whispered that it should be in a museum. Not as a piece of Hollywood memorabilia, but as a testament. A testament to every woman who ever fought back. Every woman who ever refused to be a victim. Every woman who ever survived something that should have destroyed her. Because that's what Ava Gardner did that night. In December 1946, she survived. And in surviving, she proved that even the most powerful men in the world could be stopped. If you were brave enough, if you were desperate enough, if you refused to be another silent victim. The story of Ava Gardner and Howard Hughes is not a Hollywood romance. It's not a tale of glamour and stardom. It's a horror story. A story about power and abuse. about the darkness that existed behind the golden facade of Hollywood's golden age. But it's also a story of survival, of courage, of a young woman from North Carolina who refused to let a billionaire destroy her, who fought back with everything she had, who escaped when escape seemed impossible, and who lived to become one of the greatest stars Hollywood ever produced. Not because a powerful man chose to make her one, but because she had the talent, the determination, and the strength to make herself one. That is the real story of Ava Gardner. Not the sanitized version, not the romantic legend, but the truth. The truth that was buried for decades. The truth that even now, years after her death, is still difficult to tell. Because it forces us to confront something uncomfortable, that the Hollywood we romanticize, the golden age we worship, was built on the suffering of countless women. Women who had no choice. Women who couldn't fight back. Women who were silenced. Ava Gardner was one of the lucky ones. She got away. She survived. She lived to tell her story, even if only to a few trusted friends. But for every Ava Gardner who escaped, how many others didn't? How many young women walked through those studio gates with dreams of stardom, only to find themselves trapped in a nightmare they couldn't escape? How many times did powerful men like Hughes use their wealth and influence to hurt people, knowing they would never face consequences? These are questions Hollywood still doesn't want to answer, but they're questions we need to ask. Because the only way to prevent history from repeating is to first acknowledge what that history actually was. Ava Gardner's story is a part of that history. A dark chapter in Hollywood's golden age. A reminder that behind every beautiful face on that silver screen was a real person, with real fears, real trauma, real survival stories that were never meant to be told. But now they're being told, slowly, carefully, by historians and journalists who understand that the truth matters more than the myth, that acknowledging past horrors is the only way to prevent future ones, that every silent victim deserves to have their story heard, even if it's decades too late. This is Ava Gardner's story. The one she never wanted to tell. The one that was hidden for 70 years. The one that proves that sometimes the most beautiful stars in Hollywood's history carried the darkest secrets. And the one that reminds us that survival is not just about enduring. Sometimes, survival means fighting back, even when the odds are impossible. Even when the enemy seems invincible. Even when the world tells you to stay silent. Ava Gardner didn't stay silent with her closest friends. She told them what happened. Warned them, protected them in the way no one had protected her. And now her story stands as a warning to us all. About the price of unchecked power. About the courage it takes to survive. And about the importance of believing survivors even when their stories challenge the myths we want to believe. This was the night that changed Ava Gardner forever. The night she looked into the eyes of one of the most powerful men in the world and refused to be another victim. The night she fought back and won. And that victory, quiet and hidden as it was, mattered more than any Oscar or Hollywood star, because it was the victory that let her reclaim her life. Her career, her future. Hughes may have been a billionaire, may have been powerful, may have been untouchable by the law. But on that December night in 1946, he learned that there were still some things money couldn't buy, some people who couldn't be controlled, some spirits that couldn't be broken. And one of those spirits belonged to a young woman from North Carolina named Ava Gardner, who refused to be just another name on Hughes's list of conquests. Who refused to disappear quietly when it became convenient. Who refused to let fear win. She survived. She thrived. She became a legend. Not because of Hughes, but in spite of him. And that, perhaps, is the most important part of this story. Because it proves that even in Hollywood's darkest corners, even when power seemed absolute and escape seemed impossible, the human spirit could still triumph. Ava Gardner's triumph was quiet, hidden, known only to a few trusted friends for decades. But it was real, and it mattered. And it continues to matter today, as we slowly peel back the layers of myth surrounding Hollywood's golden age and confront the uncomfortable truths beneath. This is one of those truths. Dark, disturbing, difficult to hear, but necessary, because only by acknowledging what happened can we ensure it never happens again. Only by telling these stories can we honor the survivors. Only by exposing the darkness can we fully appreciate the light. Ava Gardner was that light. A survivor, a fighter, a star who earned her place through talent and determination, not through submission to a powerful man's demands. Her story deserves to be told, not to sensationalize, not to scandalize, but to remember, to honor, and to ensure that the real Ava Gardner, not just the Hollywood legend, is never forgotten.